Welcome to All Home Care Matters, the show where we discuss all things home care, with discussions on important age-related matters and topics. Brought to you by Enriched Life Home Care Services, the #1 rated home care provider in Michigan by Top Rated Local.
Hello, and welcome back to All Home Care Matters. If this is your first time visiting us here at the show, we want to say thank you for taking time out to be with us today. We appreciate how valuable everyone's time is, and that's why we try and make each episode here at All Home Care Matters something that will hopefully matter to you. Today, we are honored to welcome the founder and owner of NextJenn Copy, Jennifer Lagemann. Welcome, Jennifer.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. Super excited to be here.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So Jennifer, let's start a little bit with how did you get involved with the home care industry? Did that start as your experience being a family caregiver, or share with us how you got involved in it?
Absolutely. I found home care like a lot of people did through a personal experience. So I took care of my grandmother at home for about 7 years, from the beginning stages of dementia all the way through having BNA services and hospice come in. And she lived with my family since they got the house. So it wasn't that we moved her in as a result of her aging. She was a part of our family structure.
Okay. And so was it after your grandmother no longer needed help, or maybe her passing, you found it rewarding and you decided, you wanted to continue that journey?
Yeah, there's a little bit there. When she passed away, I was in my first semester of college. I went to UMass Boston as a biology and pre-med major. And I was studying for a biology exam this one weekend and she passed away. And it really made me rethink my professional trajectory. And I'm like, is this really what I want to do in life? And I could not say that it was. So I started looking around for what I wanted to do. And I started looking around for jobs to kind of keep my time preoccupied because I was in my grieving process. Mm-hmm. And so I started looking around for jobs on Indeed and found a caregiver job. And I was like, I wonder what that is. And then I looked at the job description and the responsibilities. And I'm like, I've been doing this for 7 years. I didn't have any other skill sets. I hadn't had any other jobs before. So it was my first start. So that's how I got into home care, was through that experience.
Wonderful. I know for us, our professional background is in the home care industry as well. And, albeit you need that experience, whether it's personal or professional. You have to have that skill set, but I think even more so, you need to have that compassion. I like to tell families it's more than just having somebody there to perform tasks or provide those activities of daily living. You're really bonding with somebody in a way that you won't get in any other environment. In a nursing home, in an assisted living facility, a hospital, or even a doctor's office, those people have the compassion, they have the heart, but they don't have the time, right? And I think that's one of the major differences with the home care side. You get to actually sit there and, listen to stories or help them through maybe a period where they're depressed or having some anxiety without the worry of having to get to that next room or to that next patient or that next client to, tend to. So I think it's a really rewarding experience in that, you're not just getting the professional side of the skills and the tasks that you're helping to perform, but you're also getting that more emotional bonding, that more intimate connection of, hearing about their day or, maybe something that's going on in their lives or, helping to celebrate, maybe a grandchild's milestone or, several of our staff have, been a part of weddings, even taking clients to the birth of a grandchild. And, that's, I think, the unique aspect of home care that a lot of people don't necessarily look at when they're looking at home care. And I think it's as important, if even not more so, than the skill side of home care. The safety is important, their well-being is important, their personal care is important, but you also have that emotional component that really helps contribute to the healing and their safety.
Absolutely. I love the non-skill aspects of home care. I took a client to her son's wedding, and they were worried about her disrupting the ceremony or having to get up and go pee in the middle of things. So being able to provide her that dignity during her son's wedding was super important to her, and we had a super fun time. I got a free dinner out of it and got to meet her entire family, and it was so fun. I bonded with all of her family members, and it was a really surreal experience being a part of that, because they didn't want me to dress in in scrubs or anything, so I got
Right.
to wear normal attire to really promote that dignity. And one of my other clients that I worked with last year, because I was filling in with shifts in the office sometimes, her husband had just passed away, and she was just sad all the time. And I was talking her through those emotions, but I was like, there's got to be something I can do to cheer her up. So I went to Scooters and got her a Caramelicious, and she was thrilled. And I was her overnight person, so she was going to have coffee at night. And I thought it was kind of fun to see how she would do, and she was over the moon for it. And it was such a really great experience to give her a small ounce of joy, despite all the grief that she was going through over her husband that she'd been married to for decades.
Right. Right. Well, and I don't know about for you, but I know many of our office staff, our field staff, you know, some of these families we've been with for years and years and years. And when there's a passing, whether it's the client or their spouse, or even in some cases, there's been, one of their children in a car accident, you know, we become part of that. We're like part of the extended family. They get to know you on a personal level, because you spend so much time with them. And, we go to those funerals and we pay our respects. And, it's an experience that I think everybody should at least experience once if they're going into healthcare. Because, when you're like myself, I worked in a hospital, you see that patient just for a short glimpse of their life, right? And it's a short experience with them, and you try to do everything you can to help them. But once they leave the hospital, that relationship usually ends unless they get readmitted. And so, you're seeing the other side of the spectrum, right? Once they leave that doctor's office, or once they're discharged from the hospital, or whatever the case may be, now you're seeing them day to day. You're actually putting a life, if you will, to the person, right? Instead of just, their patient, Will Smith in the hospital, or Jane Smith, or whoever it is, you're treating their illness or their disease or their medical issue, but you don't know about the grandchildren, or, they had a rough night, and, you get a Caramelicious, and, it just changes the mood and their demeanor. I think it's really a very whole person approach versus just a diagnostic approach, which I think plays a significant role in that healing process. And, statistically, and you may, being a researcher, have some numbers you could share with us on this, or maybe not. It helps to reduce the readmission rate, right? Because they have somebody there making sure they're getting their meds on time, or, that they're using their walker, and they're not trying to just, show that they're independent and they can do it without the walker. And then they have a tragic fall, So there's so many roles, I think, that the home care industry as a whole plays in, helping these people that need that extra care and support by keeping them safe and keeping them in their home for as long as possible. And it's such a rewarding experience, I think. And if you don't know the industry, you can't really understand maybe what you and I are talking about. But I think it's something that really needs to be commended industry-wide, because it does play such a significant role in the healing and in the safety of these individuals that, we've been privileged to serve with.
Absolutely, because I've seen that on average, home care reduces hospitalization rates by 25%. And when there's a cost objection, for example, I think it's a really great statistic to bring up, because think about the cost of a hospitalization. Even when you look at one single fall, you're looking around 25 to 50 plus $1,000
Right.
for that one medical event, which could have been prevented through a lot of measures. And usually it's in the bathroom, where you don't have proper lighting, you have stuff on the floor, you don't have proper grab bars and other measures put in place. But it's one of those rooms that you can't put a camera in. Not that you'd
Right.
want to, but it's
Right.
one of the few rooms that can't be surveilled.
Right. And, I know we've had in the past, and I don't know if you've come across this, but we've actually had a private health insurance company before reach out to us. And as you know, private health insurance does not pay for home care services. And they actually said that this particular insured customer of theirs had such significant health needs that they actually had a special board meeting, and they decided to go ahead and fund her having home care because they found that it was significantly more affordable than what the alternative was, which would have been putting her into a facility. And so I was wondering, well, wouldn't that be the case for everybody, right? Because unless you need significant skilled care around the clock, most people who are in nursing homes or, whatever type of facility, they could be in their own home, right? And if that's the argument for that person, why wouldn't that be the argument for every person? Because, like you said, it's more affordable to have the person in their home than to have them in an institution or a facility where a lot of the services may not even be applicable to what their needs are, but they're being billed for it regardless, right? And just the overall daily cost is going to be the same regardless of what the needs are. Then as your needs increase or you need more skilled assistance, then that gets applied to that daily cost. But people would save, I think, a lot more in the long run if they were able to have that option of staying in the home. But as you know, home care can be expensive because there is very limited means to pay for it. You have the Veterans Aid and Attendance, you have long-term care insurance, and at least here, the auto insurance recently passed a bill here in our state where the rates for reimbursement for care as a result of an auto accident got significantly cut, almost 50%. So now that option isn't even really viable for most anymore. So why do you think home care is so expensive?
The unfortunate part of it is that home care workers have been severely underpaid for a long time. And it wasn't until recent that during the pandemic and all of these other labor pressures going on in the search for talent that they have been demanding higher wages instead of being valued on the front end. They're now being in the position of power with it being an employee's market right now. And about 63 to 70% of funds for home care in terms of gross revenue is spent on caregivers, whether that's through training, recruitment, whatever have you. Those are caregiver related expenses. The other 30-ish% is spent on the office staff, having on-call rotation, spending money on having an office space. They have a physical location or multiple locations. They also have to pay for their technology and their tech stack, whether that's ClearCare or some other platform. Those can get costly. So I know that a lot of people may be surprised when they are looking around at home care in terms of their area and see like the initial sticker shock. There's so much that you're paying for. You're paying for the licensure, the training, the insurance of your caregivers,
Right.
because they are being trained and being recruited. And there's so much that goes into it. And you're putting the marketing dollars into trying to get clients. So there's a lot of different expenses that go into funding home care. So that's definitely why it is as expensive as it is, and the cost of care are expected to rise significantly in the coming years.
And do you see at any point where either Medicare or even the private insurers will start to decide that it is more cost effective to make home care a billable provider over not allowing it because of whatever number of reasons? Or do you see it staying, or the trend staying as it is now, where you have those limited sources of being able to fund home care if you're a family?
Sure. I'm hopeful that they will come around to it and increase their reimbursement rates, because it's kind of unattainable at this time. But my hope is that home care agencies will become more data driven and collect data. Because if you can prove and use case studies like, hey, we have demonstrated success in keeping our clients at home without hospitalization, and they're staying at home longer, they're living longer and living healthier lives, I think this will act as proof that home care works and it saves costs. Because when you can preserve the dignity and lives of your clients, the government will take notice. And I'm hopeful that things will turn around in the coming years. I'm not planning on it happening, but I'm hopeful that it will happen.
Now, Would you say people typically find home care or know about it prior to needing it, or is it something where it's generally sought in a panic?
It's generally sought in a panic. Unfortunately, a lot of people find themselves in the hospital, told that their family member is going to be discharged the following day or that afternoon, and they're scrambling to find their options, and they may not even have heard of home care before then. And I definitely caution families, look ahead of time before you end up having a need. You can be in a buying mode before you have to be in the position to make a decision. Because when you're in the hospital and you're, frantically worried over your loved one, you're not in the best state of mind to be making such a large decision. And I think that a lot of families may rush themselves into getting that situation put together. And the problem is that when you're putting care together last minute, you're sending a nurse out, they go assess the patient, and they come back to the office, go look at their roster and see who's available. But that's because their schedules have already been made. If you're
Right.
calling last minute, your only options are certain caregivers who might not be available normally. So you're probably going to have a rotating door of caregivers, and it kind of sets providers up with a really poor reputation because they're probably going to go through a couple different caregivers for one reason or another, and potentially adding overtime to those costs as well. So there's a lot of different factors that go into it, but I would definitely caution people to look at home care ahead of time, see what your options look like, and so that you're not acting in a position of reaction when something happens. You're going to be in a position of being proactive so that when something happens and if something happens, you have a plan in place and you know who you're going to call first.
Well, I know for us, we have discovered over the last 2 years of dealing with the pandemic that it's quite surprising in a way, but at the same time, it's not as surprising, where all of a sudden families were just learning or discovering this whole industry of home care. And I think that really originated with, they were being faced with these restrictions and limitations of, you can't visit your grandma, you can't visit your wife, any number of scenarios. And, some of the more tragic ones were, the hospice nurse may have called a family and said, I just left seeing your mom. We expect her to pass in the next, 6 to 8 hours. And these families were not able to be there with their loved one in their last moments or even at all. And it's just something where I think people started to take notice and said, there's got to be another way. There's got to be other options. And, I can't tell you the countless number of families that, called us, and it was like they were just discovering this, and they were for the very first time. And they just said, this is remarkable. We never knew this existed, which leads me to this question. I have found that, doctor's offices or physical therapies or, any number of, healthcare extensions where they see a potential senior or even adult or child with a special need, and they know the dynamic there where, maybe mom has to work full time and she can't be home to take care of her husband who's, in the late stages of cancer. What do I do? And I think also, just like when I've talked to others about like dementia, I think it starts in those offices and at those, allied healthcare providers in the doctor's offices where, take a moment and learn more about the dynamics of your patient or of your, customer or the client or whoever it is you're dealing with. Help give them some options. Help start the conversation. And it doesn't necessarily have to be home care per se, but so many times these families are just they're left trying to figure it out on their own. It kind of goes back to what we were saying earlier where, more times than not, they're discovering it in a panic where they're rushing and what am I going to do? And you've probably experienced this also, Jennifer, where, our office will get phone calls from family members and patients right from their hospital room. The nurse just left. She says, I'm leaving today at 1:00. I need somebody to pick me up. And they said, I have to have somebody with me, 24 hours because of, whatever their need is. Can you help me today? And we explain to people it's very similar to when you go to the doctor for the first time. There's paperwork. We have to get medical histories. We have to know what medications you're on. Do you have drug allergies? Do you have a latex allergy? And with home care, it's a little more unique because, there may be pets in the home. Well, we need to know that, because if one of the staff is allergic to cats or dogs, then they show up and you have a cat or dog, they're not going to be able to stay anyways. And unfortunately, here in our state, we're a non-licensed state where anybody can operate as a home care provider. And that's where, we get these calls from families who tried that route or went that route, and it was a very, very bad experience for one reason or another. And, one gentleman told us, the staff, this company, if it was a company that was sent to him, they had 4 different caregivers all show up for the same shift. And he said, I didn't understand that. And they said, well, they just call us, and whoever shows up, then we got to figure it out amongst ourselves. I think those are the type of things that give home care a bad reputation, because, that's not the way we operate. And I don't think any professional company operates. But until countrywide we have licensure for all of the states, I don't see that changing too much, because there's always going to be people out there who are going to try to do things maybe on the, maybe the quick, easy route rather than the right route. And I think it just really leaves a bad taste in people's mouths, because it paints everybody as maybe doing things the same way, which is very unfortunate.
Absolutely. I've seen so many families have a bad experience, and it could be for a number of reasons. And sometimes with how difficult it is to hire caregivers, they are looking for people even without transportation, because
Right.
it's tough,
Right.
with the costs of having a car. Sometimes it's worth Ubering place to place. And for clients that need transportation, it's really difficult when
Right.
you're working with a limited workforce. You're trying to, make the best of it that you can. And it's really sad to see these challenges come about. But I kind of deviate from most people when I say that I don't believe that there's a caregiver shortage. I think there's a lot of hungry caregivers out there who would love a job to work with a home care agency that will pay them with the respect, dignity, and a reasonable wage to
Right.
help them live. And so I don't think there's a shortage, but I think there's a shortage of employers willing to give caregivers a chance at a meaningful life as a caregiver, and offering them a career ladder that allows them to grow with the agency, whether that means becoming a nurse or potentially working in their office or being a lead caregiver, giving them a way to move up in the world.
Right. Well, and I also, just to piggyback on that, Jennifer, we have found firsthand from some of our staff who have been with us 7, 8+ years, you also are trying to overcome what maybe a previous employer did to you, right? So what I mean by that is we've heard from several either interviews or staff where, well, the last company said they were hiring me full time, and I sat around for 3 weeks and I'm still waiting for my hours. Where, we tell them we're only hiring if we actually have an opening that we need to fill. We're not going to take up your time or our office staff time to hire just to have you on a list of who to call down the road if we need somebody. And then they're also taken advantage of. And that's just very unfortunate. And I think that also goes back to the licensure thing where, there needs to be some oversight, because if you've been lied to by the last 2 or 3 or even just the last one employer, you're going to be gun shy, and you're not going to be as quick to believe and, trust and, really commit yourself to the next employer because of past experiences. And so I feel like the industry is still trying to overcome those past experiences that people have had, maybe being taken advantage of or being told one thing and it ends up not being the case. And that's the unfortunate part. I think it's a two-sided thing. I think some of the staff need to be committed, but I also think that these companies also have to commit themselves to their staff. That's something we're very proud of. We have our logo is a tree. And for our staff who, have these anniversaries, they get a beautiful crystal tree with their name engraved on it, with their hire in date. And it's quite a to-do, because we believe next to the safety and well-being of our clients and families, the staff is the most important thing. Now, our case managers, they're important because they go out and they do oversight and they do wellness checks and, all this other stuff that plays a pivotal, vital role. But the staff is the front line, right? They're the ones that are making sure that that client has had their morning meds, that they've had their personal care, all of the stuff that they need to function through the day. And sometimes they don't get the appreciation other places that they really are deserving of. And that's very unfortunate. I've recently told somebody, you know, the frontline heroes during the pandemic and even currently, your nurses, doctors, hospitals, nursing homes, they got wonderful, wonderful recognition. But very seldomly and rarely did I ever hear the home care staff getting that recognition. And if you really look at it, the big picture, they truly are the front lines before the hospital, before the nursing home, because we're keeping them safe. We're keeping them, properly, monitored. And you didn't really see that recognition come out for them, which I thought was disappointing, because I think that was a missed opportunity to really elevate the status of the home care industry and showing the important work that everyone is doing, from the office to the staff, in keeping these seniors and those with special needs safe during the pandemic, and that was just unfortunate.
Absolutely. Like the average hospital stay is about 4.5 days. Who is caring for that person the other 360-ish? Who's there
Right.
for them even when they're in the hospital? Who's checking in with their nurse? Who's checking with their family to make sure they're okay? Because their spouse might be at home worried sick, and that could cause them to have more anxiety, depression, and isolation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what brought you then to becoming a consultant for, because that's what NextJenn Copy is doing now. You're consulting with home care companies, from being a family caregiver to then being a professional caregiver, then to being a home care administrator. Now you're consulting with these companies and helping them. What brought you around to that role?
Sure. I was tired of seeing the same problems happen over and over and over again. So I took a deep dive into studying caregiver poverty. I've studied the biology of aging to help us really get a better understanding of who we're really working with, our caregivers and our clients. Because I found myself, when I was doing an inquiry call, that an adult daughter would call me and say, my mom has macular degeneration. And I found myself not knowing a lot of what these conditions were. And I felt like the caller was educating me on what's something that I didn't know about, when I should be the subject matter expert in talking to them about how I can care for their mom. So I wanted to come into these calls in a position of empowerment and being able to educate a caller on how we can help them. But I can't do that if I don't know what these basic conditions are. So I took to studying the various conditions that disproportionately affect our older adult population, and took to understanding poverty to better understand how caregivers operate. Because I see a lot of owners saying, I can't believe my caregiver did this, or I can't believe my caregiver did that. And understanding the root of the behavior, or why was your caregiver sleeping on a night shift? Is it because you're playing into the game of poverty? Because 18% of caregivers live below the poverty line. And if we want to elevate this industry in any way, we need to be the best employer and elevate the caregiving position, because it's treated with little respect right now. Low barrier to entry. There's little to no barriers that allow someone to become a caregiver. With the licensed states as an exception, because you have to be a home health aide or home care aide. There is little barrier to entry, meaning little respect, little education required, no experience required. It lends itself to have a poor reputation, but we have a duty to change that. So if we can really understand and elevate who our caregivers are, we can mentor and coach them to become the best people that they can be, as we help them through their personal problems. Because I feel like a lot of people don't take the time to get to know who their caregivers are outside of work. Are you talking to them about their personal life? What are they going through? Are they a nursing school student? Can they use more hours? Are they needing to study more for exams, so they need to kind of lessen their schedule a little bit? Or do they want a variety of clients to help them with their skill set when they're going to practicals and doing clinicals? Do they want a more diverse client set to help supplement their knowledge in school? So I think a lot of it is learning about who your caregivers are and learning about the biology of aging, because a lot of us talk about what's normal and not normal. But the fact of the matter is that there's no normal aging process. No two people go through the same aging process, because two people that grow up in the same household are unlikely to die at the same time. And there's no one set path that if you deviate from it, oh, you're not aging right. We're all aging It doesn't
Right.
matter. It doesn't start magically at 55 or some arbitrary number. So I think that we need to kind of remove the ageism from the field. I see it a lot where you're putting age restrictions subtly in your job descriptions or job ads, or you're only putting younger people in your job display ads and kind of subtly hinting at who you're looking for, or putting recent high school grad in your job descriptions, kind of subtly hinting at who you're exactly looking for, which could deter older applicants from applying, or maybe your early retirees who are looking to maintain their sense of purpose and who could be a really great worker that would stay with you for a really long time.
What have you found as a common characteristic for a successful caregiver versus one that may not end up being successful? Is there a common characteristic or commonality there?
Sure, I definitely see a lot of the same traits over and over again as someone that's committed. I feel like when people may see someone that job hops, they might think of them differently. I've definitely been in that position where I've been moving from position to position. I've moved a lot over the years, and it's given me a lot of experience. So it's kind of worked against me in a lot of cases, but I feel that it has diversified my skill set because each company needed something different for me. So having done that, I have a diverse skill set. And I think that a lot of caregivers are probably overlooked in terms of moving from job to job. But the problem is that a lot of people don't want to just leave a job. The problem is they may leave you for a $0.25 raise. Why might that be? Because that could make the difference for them for now, because they're in survival mode.
Right.
And that's how a lot of our caregivers are living. They can't afford to think about continuing education because they're worried about next week paying rent, paying for their car bill, paying for their auto insurance because you're texting them that it's about to expire. That's definitely something I would underscore as well.
Okay. So you were talking about kind of how you're helping to empower the home care companies and caregivers. How would you say that families can become more empowered on the caregiving and, well, really the home care journey?
Sure. I would encourage home care owners to be more active in their community, to do more community outreach, have a robust content strategy that can offer your community an outlet to learn more about what home care is. What are the signs of dementia? What should I be looking for if I am visiting my loved one? Because not everybody lives in town or might visit often.
Right.
So if there's something they can look for, and offering content as a way to give insight into your agency, how you operate, and positioning yourself as a subject matter expert in the home care industry to help people understand, look, I'm not just here for money. I am here to take care of you, and to really offer that. Because with home care, usually you don't offer discounts. Usually there's no free trial. So in this type of business, you have to offer something of value to people. So we can offer people content, information, education that can help them make an informed decision. Because a lot of people might not know what Medicaid is. They might not know that their father has the Veterans Aid and Attendance benefit.
Right.
So a lot of people might be coming from a position of not knowing anything about what they could be using, or they don't know about hospice.
Right.
You can have home care and hospice, but you can't have home health and hospice. So some people might not know that. And to be a resource, like when I did inquiry calls and it wasn't for our territory, or it wasn't even about home care, I gave them an answer, gave them a link, gave them a number, gave them the name of someone. I wouldn't just let them go or hang up the phone. I made sure I gave them the next step to help them get to where they wanted to be, in case they might need some care in the area or know someone. You don't know who people know. So
Exactly.
That's why I do that.
And I know, one thing that it seems like we're always combating and trying to explain and differentiate with is a family will call and say, right now we have home health care, but once it's done, we're going to need home care. And that really, on the surface, you and I, that doesn't tend to really make a lot of sense, but they have in their head, I can't have both. And we said, the one thing about home care is it complements any other service you can have. We can't provide what maybe the home health care provider is giving. We can't provide what hospice may be giving. And one example that really has stood out for years with us is, we were helping a very wonderful, wonderful, sweet lady, and her daughter lived far up north of her mother. And we were constantly giving the daughter, status reports and updates. And over time, it got to the point where we kept strongly urging and recommending mom needs more help. She will go, one day our staff showed up at the home and mom was on the porch and just moments away from falling right over the porch. And it was a good 6-8 feet drop. And the daughter, okay, well, I'll talk to her. Well, mom had some pretty, aggressive, progressive dementia. So it's not really going to be a very productive conversation. And about a week later, the daughter came down, and when she was down here, she signed mom up for hospice. And, she came by the offices and was talking with a couple of our case managers and said, I think I'm just going to have you guys come 1 day a week for 4 hours now. Well, we were only there 2 days a week for 4 hours. And so the case managers said, well, why are you reducing it when you really should consider increasing it? Well, hospice said they're on board now, so they're going to take care of everything and they'll be with mom 24 hours. And, they tried to explain to the daughter, no, hospice won't physically be with your mom 24 hours, but they will be on call and available if needed 24 hours. Daughter was 100% convinced that that was not the case. And then the next day we get a call from the daughter and she says, I need to have you guys come to mom's now 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Hospice says that they're only going to be available on call 24 hours, but they won't physically be with mom. But see, something very, very closely related, she's hearing they're going to be with mom 24 hours versus the 24 hours on call. And I find that so many families, they, with home health care and home care, that gets confused, and I just think it starts, like we were saying earlier, I think it starts in the doctor's offices, the hospitals with the discharge planners. Families, they can't be expected to know something they really have no need to know until, that panic, like we were talking about, sets in. But when they do get the information, it's so much to really take in at one time. And there's so many similarities, but big differences, that sometimes they're missing the differences and only hearing the similarities, right? And I just think that so many families would benefit from just having almost like a crash course on what long-term care provides, or even short-term care, so that they know about these different resources, because like this daughter, for months, we were trying to, share with her our concerns about mom needing more care, whether it's us or maybe a grandson or, something, because we were very concerned about her safety and well-being, and thankfully the daughter, finally adhered to it, and she did make the trip down. But then now, instead of increasing the time, she's actually reducing it. And had we not tried to talk to her about it, she may have very well gone back up thinking, well, hospice is going to be there and everything will be fine, but that's not to the fault of the daughter. I think that just is the reality of people don't know what they don't know. And then you try your best to explain it and give explanations. And, that's one of the biggest hurdles, I think, is just people having a better understanding of the differences between these different professions, but also the different resources that are available to them. And we've had several families who had a mom or a father or a loved one in a nursing home because they didn't know about home care. So they thought that was the only option. It's either nursing home or the hospital, and so many families could have their loved ones in the home where they're going to heal better. They're going to thrive better being in their own environment than being in a facility, but they didn't know that there were other options available to them. So I applaud you for, the work you're doing. Who would you say should be involved in that decision-making for home care?
I'd say if we are working with someone who has a neurocognitive disorder like dementia, that the person who should be making the call should be the POA. Because a lot of the time we might be talking to someone who isn't the POA and they're talking about how we want care done, how we want this to be taken care of, but they're not the decision maker and they can't control how those decisions are made. So I encourage people to do their research no matter who you are. But when it comes to calling or inquiring about home care services, have the POA call and coordinate with people who are involved in your care, like your primary care provider, or if you have a geriatric care manager, to have them involved as well. But to make sure that the POA is the one that's really calling and interacting with the home care agency, because they're not allowed to sign the contract, and they can't sign on in terms of the payment method either. So I feel like a lot of people might not understand the paperwork and admin stuff of it all when it comes to home care. Just like, can I just have somebody here at 5
Right.
p.m.? And they don't understand like there's a process.
Right.
Like I had an inquiry call one time. My dad's on the toilet and I can't do it. I need to hear now. And I'm just like, I don't even know what address you're at. I don't know what type of care you're needing. And they're in a community. So I thought that was kind of weird that they couldn't have a facility staff member come in. But a lot of it is education. Like I had a hospice call with a mutual client, and they said, we just got off the phone with one of your caregivers and they aren't giving our patient medication they need. It was a syringe medication.
Okay.
And they're like, we want them to feel empowered to give this patient medication whenever she needs it or looks agitated. The thing is, pain and agitation is very subjective.
Right.
We're not nurses. We're not sending nurses over there all the time to do that. And the son wasn't home either. And I had to go educate every single caregiver on our care team to say, hey, I know that hospice called and told you one thing, and I'm going to come and tell you the exact opposite of what she told you, because we are non-medical and we're not able to do that. So it was educating all of our staff and also educating the hospice agency to let them know, look, that's outside of our scope of care and our caregivers cannot dispense medication.
Just out of curiosity, Jennifer, and I'll tell you why I'm asking this. We've dealt with almost an exact same situation where a hospice nurse would come by, and she had to come by like 3-4 times this particular week. And she's trying to basically authorize our staff to give Demerol or morphine injections. And, so the staff is calling us saying, we didn't think we could do, and no, you can't do this. This is well beyond your scope. And so we had to have a call with the nurse administrator at this particular hospice provider, and they were very taken back and did not know why this particular hospice nurse was trying to authorize this, other than the fact maybe she didn't want to have to keep coming by this house. And when you guys reached out to the hospice, what was the reasoning or response? Did you get one?
Yeah, they were like, I can't believe that. What do you mean you can't give her medication? And
Okay.
like, when it comes to a family member, sure, they might be the patient's only option. But when in home care, we're bound by licensure. We have protocols and procedures we have to abide by. So we can't afford that type of liability.
Right.
And that's exactly what I told them. And they seemed really surprised and taken aback by it. But
Okay.
I don't want our caregivers to lose their licensure. Like we have some CNAs on staff, and this could be a huge risk for them. And even in general, a lot of our caregivers did not feel comfortable dispensing medications.
Right.
And they reported not feeling, comfortable when that hospice had called them about this patient. And like, we need to work together. Like, we're not trying to edge each other out in any way, but we need to work together and do these things together. Like when we get on a bath schedule, look, the hospice is not going to come every day, but we need to know when they're going to do a bed bath so that we can have our caregivers do it on the other days.
Right. When you're dealing with a family, because there's sensitive situations, there's sometimes, hopefully less than not, conflict or disagreements between family members or the decision makers. Are there words or phrases that you would suggest that are not used when speaking with the family?
Sure. I would say to avoid using assessment. I feel like it brings a really weird connotation to it. Can we visit your house and see what's going on? Like, I feel like if we can use normal lay terms, I think it would really help lend some gravity to the situation, because a lot of people may not know what an intake is or an assessment. And when it comes to family and loved ones, a lot of people don't feel that lovey-dovey family when they are working with their family member. A lot of people are not too close with their loved ones, and you might see a lot of estranged family members coming back into someone's life. So there's a lot of family dynamics that we could be working with. So when I'm writing website copy, I tend to use circle of support instead, because that doesn't assume the proximity of the relationship to someone. So I try to use more neutral terms, because not everyone's mom is loving to them necessarily, and we don't want to push buttons that might propel them away from using us as a provider.
Okay. And what would you say is your best advice to families who are searching for home care now?
Sure. I would say find someone that you would feel comfortable with taking care of your loved one. See what the people say. Like, call a bunch of agencies. I encourage you to call around and see what your options are. And then to, take pricing into account, take your budget into account, but also think about who you talk to. Did they make you feel good? Did they make you feel safe? Did they make you feel warm, protected? Because I feel like a lot of the inquiry call can set the expectation for a home care agency. It is a huge part of the buying process. And I think that that first initial interaction with a business is super important into how things will go into the future. So I definitely take some time into listening how that call goes, see how much time they spend with you. Are they trying to get bare bones information and get off the phone with you? Or are they really trying to do a life history, get a story, get your understanding of the situation, see how they can take care of you as a family member as well, instead of just take care of your loved one? I would definitely encourage that, because in my situation with my family, we had a great home care aide that gave my grandma baths and didn't treat her like she was bedbound. Every other aide did, and just had her in bed all day long. No rotation, no repositioning. She was never moved. But this girl took her into a wheelchair. We built a ramp, and she would take her outside, do a couple laps around the driveway, pick a flower, come back inside, give her lunch. She really got her active. And she didn't speak any English either. And she spoke to her like a friend, even if she couldn't understand what she was saying. She built rapport. She had a really reassuring and gentle voice. And she became a part of our family. We invited her to the funeral, and she became a part of our lives. And so when you can develop that relationship, that's so important.
Right. And I'm going to just guess here, you're probably still in touch with that aide to this day?
Of course.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's, again, one of the very special bonds that forms with the home care industry. Not that it doesn't happen necessarily with, with the others, but I think more so because you do see the other side of that person. They're more than just the patient or, the customer or the client that's in that doctor's office or in that hospital bed. You get to see the other side of it, which I think is just such a remarkable, valuable, unique experience with the home care industry that you don't get with the others. Now you've had a lot of roles. So from the family caregiver to being a professional caregiver to helping with home care administration to now with NextJenn Copy. What was your favorite role and what made it your favorite role?
My favorite role, I have a love-hate relationship with, and that was definitely scheduling. That was like the most common function I did within my home care work. And it was tough at times, like having to be the one designated to answer the phones. It was super disheartening a lot of the time because you're hearing complaints after complaint after complaint. But it was really cool to see the magic that happens when you pair the perfect caregiver with the perfect client and they hit it off. You do an intro and they just have that spark between them that you expect between a caregiver and a client when they're a right fit. And just seeing those relationships unfold, like, oh my God, we went out to lunch today. We went to the park, we walked the dog, and just seeing what they do and just helping a client live their best life, I think is the most gratifying thing. And to be able to put those relationships together, I think is so important. Like, I would get on a call with the caregiver and go over the care plan. Like, look, this person loves to garden. They love to get in the car and go for a ride, or whatever else they like to do. I love to promote what they're interested in and to help them stay engaged with their interests, because just because you're aging does not mean that you have to sacrifice what you love. And home care helps to promote that. I think it's the biggest thing. Like, I worked with a client that loved to go out, and he had a mileage barrier. I think we were limited to like 6 miles a day or something like that. I drove him around for an hour, probably 25 miles or something like that. And I put down 6 on my time sheet, because he had such a fun time. I drove him through the local university, and he was like, oh, I'm sure that there's a lot of guys taking girls back to their dorm room, and just seeing him, in his authentic self.
He lit up. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. He lit up. I drove him through a bunch of cornfields. I drove him all around and just gave him a really good glimpse of the city. We drove through downtown, showed him the Capitol and everything. It was so fun. And he just got to go and enjoy his day. And he didn't remember it when we got back, but for that moment, he was really enjoying himself. And that was so gratifying.
So part of NextJenn Copy is you're helping these home care businesses to share stories. Explain what you mean by sharing stories, like a story like you just shared about this gentleman, or what are the stories that you're helping to share?
Oh, sure. The stories I use help with agencies is to help them tell like a movie. There's like a plot. You go from the beginning, there's a character, the character meets a problem, then they meet a guide that helps them solve their problem. The character takes an action, and then they solve their problem and avoid the doom that could potentially come with not solving that problem or not coming to that conclusion. So I use that same movie structure in terms of telling a story, and I apply that to how a home care agency tells their story and their brand narrative, how they talk about themselves. It's like, let's say you have a sales rep that's talking about your agency in a really generic, boring way. Then you have the owner talking about the story in a really compelling way. And that could really change the way that you talk about your brand. But if not everyone's on the same wavelength, telling the same messaging in their own way, you could really be missing out on a lot of business, depending on how you say it, what you say. And so I use that structure in their website, in their blogs, in their elevator pitch, all of that.
And how long have you been doing NextJenn Copy? When did you start it?
Sure, for about like 5 years.
Oh, okay. So you've been around for a while. Any good stories or success stories you have with it?
I would say one of the caregiver recruitment campaigns I did helped an agency get 70 caregivers over the course of like 3 months.
Wow, that's incredible. Now, if we were to talk to you again in, say, 3, 4 years, what would you like to see have changed in the industry over that period of time?
Sure. I would love to see reduced waiting lists for care. I see so many agencies lining up care in terms of a waiting list, and I think it's really sad to see. I hope to see better hiring practices that allow for more caregivers to be compensated fairly and be given robust benefits packages that really help them propel in their career and in their personal life, really investing in caregivers as people rather than seeing them as replaceable commodities. I see a lot of people who have the mindset that caregivers are disposable, or I can just have another one of you tomorrow. So when we can get away from that mentality, I think we'll be in a much better place in terms of the industry.
Mm-hmm. And do you see eventually the country going to full licensure for home care?
I hope so. I think with the HCAOA report coming out and them working on those initiatives, one of them being that regulation, I think that we're heading in the right direction to make that happen.
Because I know we had spoke to Vicky Hoke, who is the executive director of the Home Care Association of America, and we're all pushing for that hard because again, it will eliminate a lot of these bad practices that not only hurts the industry, but even more so hurts these families that are either being taken advantage of or they're not getting the care that they're supposed to be getting. And I think it's a win-win on both sides, and hopefully sooner rather than later it will get recognized as a licensure across the country, because again, the bottom line is it's the care that these people deserve, because today it could be someone down the road getting home care, but tomorrow it could be one of your loved ones. And it's just having that security and that comfort and that peace of mind in place so that the care is equal across the board. Because again, when you have so many differences and discrepancies from state to state, I just don't think it will get the recognition that it truly deserves, or even the reputation that it deserves, when you have people out there practicing it in a way that is really below standard. And I think that's the unfortunate part that really it boils down to. And the protection of these families should be at first and foremost of everybody's mind. So hopefully we'll see that change at some point. And I just appreciate you taking the time to come on and talk to us today, Jennifer. And we'll have the links to NextJenn Copy and to all of your social platforms in the show notes, as well as how people can reach out to you.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a really fun time.
Yeah, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Thank you for joining us today at All Home Care Matters. All Home Care Matters is here to help families as they navigate these long-term care issues. We invite you to visit us at allhomecarematters.com, where there's a private, secure, fillable form where you can give us feedback, show ideas, or if you have questions. Every form is read and responded to. And remember, you can listen to the show on any of your favorite podcast streaming platforms or watch the show on our YouTube channel. Just make sure to hit that subscribe button so that you never miss an episode. We'd also like to extend our gratitude to Jennifer Lagemann for taking time to speak with us today about NextJenn Copy and home care. Thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you here next time at All Home Care Matters.
Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to you joining us again on another episode of All Home Care Matters. To learn more about the show and to connect with us, visit us at allhomecarematters.com.